I actually didn't expect to be making this video, I'm not going to lie. I normally try and avoid Chelsea videos where I can. I know I'm a Chelsea fan, but I just love football and football tactics, and that's normally what I want my channel to be about. But out of my last three videos, two of them have been Chelsea. One of them is obviously the secret tactic that Pochettino was using, which I thought was a sign of him improving as Chelsea manager. And then after that, I did everything we learned on the final day of the season. I talked about why I think Pochettino is the right man for Chelsea and can take them further forward. But fast forward by 24 hours after I uploaded that video, and Matt Law has posted, who is a brilliant journalist, by the way, posted that Pochettino and Chelsea have agreed to part ways. I think it was something like Monday morning or Tuesday morning. They had a meeting and they agreed to part ways due to philosophical differences. But something about it doesn't sit right with me. However, I mean, it's happened. We've got to move on with it. And inevitably, Chelsea are going to be looking for new managers, young managers, apparently, that is going to replace Pochettino and take the club further. So let's discuss some potential options to replace Pochettino at Chelsea. And I'm going to start with my least favourite option and I'll end with my favourite. So stick around to see who I think would be the best option for Chelsea. Kicking us off at the bottom of my list is Thomas Frank. Now, I can't explain why. I'm just not a big fan of this. I think he's a brilliant manager and he's got a similar style to a lot of managers that are on this list. And he does have Premier League experience, which sets him apart. And it's undeniable what he's done at Brentford has been incredible. But I think Brentford's the right club for him personally. I think that's what he's done there, regardless of what's happened this season, whether you think it's a good or bad season. I think he's done a really good job over the last few years and he should stay at Brentford. That just seems like the right place for him. But I think the one thing that Chelsea are a big fan of is his ability to work in a club structure. I think a main reason for Pochettino leaving was because he didn't want to work necessarily to the instructions of Winstanley, Lawrence, Egbali and Boehly. I think Pochettino wanted a bit more say in style of football, signings, just general day-to-day running of the club. Whereas at Brentford, we know that they have such a data-driven system. They've got specialists for everything, from set pieces, who's actually just moved to Chelsea, but, you know, like throw-in specialists, recruitment specialists, where everything is data-driven. Thomas Frank is given a player that looks promising due to data and due to the metrics that they've been putting up, and it's up to Thomas Frank to make them work. That's how it works at Brentford, and it's worked so well for them. And that's how they keep doing really, really well with their signings. And I think that's why Chelsea love it, because that they think that they could do the same thing with him. And I think that suits how he runs a club. He's more of a coach, not a manager. Chelsea want a coach, not a manager. So that, for me, is a big reason why I think Chelsea want him. But I just don't see this as a step forward. For me, this is more of it's not an upgrade. It's a side grade. Is that a word? Side grade? Next on the list is Enzo Maresca, and I think what Maresca has done at Leicester is nothing short of brilliant. I mean, they've done a really good job in the Championship, playing a really attractive style of football. But there's something about it that just doesn't quite sit with me either. It's been reported that Chelsea are looking for a manager that's going to bring a possession style of football, and this man is exactly that. You know, he was the assistant to Pep Guardiola for a couple of years, and he's never really had a main manager role. He's always been an assistant. Until Leicester, really, anyway. I think he had a couple of spells in, like, Serie B. For the most part, a lot of his experience has come from working with the youth squad at Man City, where he won the Premier League 2 with them, with the likes of Romeo Lavia and Cole Palmer in his squad. And obviously, working with Pep, he's got a similar sort of philosophy. The short, quick passes, where if you lose the ball, you can counter-press immediately, is something that is very evident in this Leicester squad, and I think Chelsea would love that. And his teams line up in a 4-3-3, which I think would actually suit our squad quite well. It depends if Gallagher's staying or not, but I talk about that number 10 role that we've seen in this 4-2-3-1 we've used this past season, and Gallagher also as a double pivot. As he's played both, we can kind of see the differences. I think for me, a 4-3-3 is the best way to get Caicedo, Enzo and Gallagher into the team effectively, but obviously then you lose an attacking outlet, so it depends whether it's worth the trade-off or not. In build-up as well, he does invert a full-back to form this 3-2-5, which is similar to what Pochettino was doing with Cucurella towards the end of the season, and it worked really well, so I think Maresca would do a similar sort of thing, probably with Cucurella, and chances are it's going to work. But the main thing for me about Maresca is that I think he had Leicester about 12 points clear at the top of the Championship, and yet they went down to the final day, or nearly the final day, to see if they got promoted. Obviously, they did win the league in the end, but they nearly threw away them 12 points, and that's a little bit concerning for me. But We don't know the exact ins and outs as to why that happened, but it doesn't fill me with confidence. But even though he's second to last on my list, out of the reported shortlist that there is, I actually think that I don't hate it either. The more I think about it, I think whilst he's not my favourite, I think he is the most suitable. I think. Okay, next is Michel, and I've done a whole video on how Michel plays at Girona. I think what he's doing there is sensational. They've obviously finished third in La Liga this year. If you want to see an in-depth review on his tactics at Girona, then go and check out my video on that. But I'll be honest, I really like him. I really like him. His character, his style, the fluid form of football that he plays, and just the high intensity. It's something that I really like, and I wish I could have him higher on this list, but I do have some concerns. Now, in transition, they go into a 3-1-6 shape, which is a very abnormal thing to see. Even Pep Guardiola only does a 3-2-5, so it's very out there for a team like Girona to decide to go into a 3-1-6. But it's done them really well this season, so who are we to judge? And I think a lot of the Chelsea players suit this system well. I think what we see with Alex Garcia as the single pivot, Enzo Fernandez could do a similar job with his passing abilities. You look at Gutierrez, the left back, who pushes into a number 10 half the time. I think Chilwell is perfectly capable of doing that. And on the right hand side, you've got Yan Couto, who is technically a right back but almost plays as a right winger, and Reece James and Malo Gusto are both perfectly capable of doing that. I think that's probably where they are best. And you look at what Michel has done with Savio. He's turned him into like a superstar in the European football scene at the moment. And I think he could do a similar thing with Mudryk. Now, maybe I'm pushing a little bit there, but the quick dribbling style of play, which we see from Savio, I think Michel might be able to get something similar out of Mudryk, and obviously maybe start to prove his value a little bit more. But despite this attacking brilliance, I do think that there are some defensive concerns if he was in the Premier League. Now, obviously in the La Liga, going into a 3-1-6 is quite out there, but they do well because they score a lot of goals, but as much as they take a lot of shots, they concede a lot of shots as well. In fact, I think they concede 13.5 shots a game, which is the third worst out of the entire league this season. And when you think about that in the Premier League, no disrespect to La Liga, but the players in the Premier League, I think if you're conceding 13.5 shots a game, you are going to concede a lot more than what you do in La Liga. So I think that's where some concerns would come in regarding whether this system would suit the Premier League football. But having said that, in case I haven't said, I really like him. I wish I could have him higher. Next up is Kieran McKenna, and it might shock you that he's only halfway down this list, given that he's probably the main candidate, the favourite to get the job, but he's also the manager I know least about. I did a brief review of Ipswich's tactics when we watched when they got promoted, so if you want to see that video, then check that one out, but I don't know a hell of a lot about him compared to the other managers that I've got on this list, so I think tactically from what I've seen, I can understand why Chelsea are interested in him, and he's deemed so promising and an upcoming coach that could really do well in the league, a bit like what we've seen Arteta do. And his philosophy is a nice balance between attack, defence. They play horizontal or vertical football depending on the situation of the game, which is something a lot of teams don't do these days. And it's no doubt that Ipswich knew how to score goals. So I think a lot of that is probably down to how he's managed to get them playing, and I think it's something that he would do at Chelsea as well. He lines his teams up in a 4-2-3-1, similar to how Pochettino had them set up, but the main difference is how they attack in transition. Instead, like we've seen with Chelsea, a fullback inverts and then the midfielder pushes high. Instead, what McKenna does is, normally at Ipswich it's been the right back will tuck in to form a back three. He'll be the right centre-back of a back three. The two midfielders stay as double pivots, and then the left back has been joining the attacking line. So rather than inverting and pushing a midfielder high, they just send the fullback high into this 3-2-5 shape, and it's normally been Leif Davis, who has been sensational in the Championship. The problem I do have with this is I think Chilwell could do something similar, but for me, I actually think you're better off playing Cucurella and leaving him in the back line, so he's the left centre-back of a back three, and then just replicating this system, but on the right side of the pitch instead with Reece James or Malo Gusto, depending. And then it also means that the winger that was on that side where the fullback is attacking from can then almost shift inside a little bit, pick up a half space, drop deep, find a pocket. And we've seen Palmer do this so well for Chelsea this year. It's pretty much exactly what he would be doing. So forming this box midfield and create overloads in the middle, which is why I also think that McKenna's system is really suited for the Premier League. I think a major thing as well is how good he is at getting his teams to press. Ipswich have got one of the best PPDAs in their league, and you look at the likes of Arteta, Pep, Klopp, their success is half attributed to how pressing they can be. If they lose the ball, they win it back so quick. That's where a lot of their attacks come from and how they're so successful. So I think, again, that's something that McKenna has already got locked down. So he's showing a lot of good signs already, so surely there must be a downfall. And yes, I do think there is a downfall. I think he's a brilliant man-to-man coach, but for me, this screams more Graham Potter than it does anything else. It looks like he's going to come to Chelsea from a championship club and probably a bit out of his depth. For me, instead, I think the right move for him is to go to Brighton, where he can develop his style of play for the Premier League at a relatively decent mid-table side. And then, as we've seen, Brighton can sometimes finish something like 5th or 6th. So if he does well with them, they're certainly a team that's capable of doing that. But I think that's where he should at least take his next career step. Personally, anyway. I will say this, though. If he does come, keep an eye on Amari Hutchinson. That would be a very interesting situation. Keep your eye on him if McKenna goes to Chelsea. Next up, I have Ruben Amorim, and we all thought he was going to Liverpool for a while, and when I did a video on how Liverpool could have lined up under Amorim, I did a lot of research on his tactics, and I actually really liked what I saw. He's also the first, and I think only manager on this list that lines up in a back 3/a back 5, and Chelsea obviously have an abundant amount of centre-backs, so perfect. And it also allows some freedom for the fullbacks. The right wing back and left wing back are given a bit more of an attacking ability, which obviously Ben Chilwell, Reece James, Malagusto would love. So I think that's immediately something good. They also defend in a 5-2-3 and they force their opposition wide. I like how in the Portuguese league he's making his team control the middle of the pitch, and his distances are really good. I like his distances between the lines because it stops the opposition from being able to play through them easily, which again, in the Premier League, you have to be good at stopping teams play through your lines. So I like it. So far, it sounds good. And his talent recruitment is also undeniable. You look at the likes of Victor Gyökeres and Diomande. What he has done with them players is brilliant. I do think that Chelsea would probably need to sign a number 9 should Amorim come in. I think they should anyway, but especially under Amorim's system, I think they'd need a proper out-and-out number 9. Maybe even it is Gyökeres, but I think he could bring great success. The only thing I'm confused about, and which is why he's not higher on my list, is because I'm a bit confused about his situation in Sporting. I remember I think he spoke to West Ham without permission, but then allegedly Chelsea paid for that flight anyway. All a bit weird. If that's true, then surely there was something going on there. But I thought he then came out and said that he was committing himself to Sporting for another year. So it doesn't sound like this is going to happen, but we never know. I really like him though, so that's why he's high up on my list. And the penultimate manager on my list is De Zerbi, and this surely seems destined. Or does it? I can't figure out what's going on with De Zerbi. I was shocked when he announced he was leaving Brighton because I thought he had quite a good project going on there. I thought he was going to stay with them for a good couple more years. And I really like him. I assumed that the reason he left was because he was going to go to the likes of Juventus, AC Milan or Bayern Munich. But obviously Thiago Motta's gone to Juventus, Kompany has gone to Bayern Munich and Fonseca's gone to AC Milan. So actually he didn't have another job lined up, which is why this whole Chelsea situation seems a bit bizarre to me. Obviously keep an eye on Erik ten Hag as well, see what happens over on that side. But I think there's a lot of things to like about De Zerbi. There are also problems. I think for me, I'd actually tactically have him a little bit lower down. I also don't know if he suits this young criteria as much, any more so than Pochettino would. But I think the whole situation screams like it could happen, which is why I've put him higher, because of the likelihood of it happening. And I do like his style of play. He's obviously proven himself in the league. He took Brighton into the Europa League. They've always been a pretty solid Premier League side. And he's obviously used the likes of Colwill, Cucurella and Caicedo before, and used them well enough to then earn £175 million from Chelsea for them. So he clearly knows what he's doing. He makes players very versatile. They can play, you look at like Gross, Caicedo, Veltman. They can play so many different positions, and I like his adaptability with players. And his pulling power, by the way, incredible. How has he managed to get Ansu Fati out of Barcelona to Brighton? Regardless of the fact that it actually turned out shit, I think we know that at the time that seemed like an unbelievable transfer. And that was down to De Zerbi managing to convince him. So he's clearly got something about him. The one player that I'm confused about, though, is Robert Sanchez, because obviously De Zerbi didn't like Sanchez at Brighton, dropped him to third choice goalkeeper, and Chelsea signed him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But tactically, De Zerbi uses a 4-2-3-1, and there's a heavy emphasis on using the goalkeeper, which for me seems like there could be a way back into this team for Kepa. We know he's probably the best ball-playing goalkeeper we've got, so he would suit this pretty well. And their attacking shape is a 2-3-5 instead, which is an interesting form of attacking, but typical De Zerbi, where obviously if they do lose the ball, one of the midfielders will drop back into the defensive line to maintain a defensive overload, and then they'll obviously try and get back into shape. But I think this structure could be a reason why Brighton have been conceding a few more goals recently. He's a very high risk, high reward kind of manager, a bit like Ange Postecoglou is at Spurs. You look at how they play, it's go all out. You score 4 goals, you concede 4 goals. And I personally am a big fan of that type of football. But would he be my first choice? No. Even tactically, I think Amorim or McKenna would be better. But it just seems obvious. And that's why I've got him so high. Surely there's something going on here. Maybe there's not. Maybe we're reading into it too much. But surely. Finally, last but not least, my favourite option to replace Pochettino at Chelsea is Sebastian Hoeneß. The turnaround that he has done at Stuttgart is incredible, and he's done it playing an attractive brand of football as well. And yet, he's probably the least known name out of everyone I've mentioned so far today. Whilst he's top of my list, I think he's going to be the most difficult to get. Obviously, Stuttgart have got Champions League football next season, and they finished second in the Bundesliga. He's done an insane job with them. Surely he's going to want to commit to that. I think he signed a new contract recently as well, so getting him out of Germany is going to be tough. But I like his style of play and I like his tactics, which is why he's my favourite option. Now, his teams line up in a 4-4-2, but I promise you, it's not like we're going to be watching Sean Dyche or Roy Hodgson sort of 4-4-2s. Well, not really anyway. But it does also sometimes become a 4-2-3-1. And what I like most about this system is his use of wide players and also the player distances. This is a massive thing in football that I don't know if it's talked about enough. The distances between his lines are really crucial into how his teams play. So they build in this 4-2 shape, which means they've got their 4 defenders almost at the first line of building out, and then you've got the 2 midfielders sat in front of them as the double pivots, and then you've got this massive space of pitch left empty, and then there's the 2 strikers who pin the opposition centre-backs pretty deep. But in transition, it does go into a 3-2-5, a bit similar to McKenna, where a fullback will push much higher. An attacking midfielder can then drop deeper into the pockets, pick up the balls from a box midfield. There's a lot of overlapping runs and crosses into the box, which I think players like Nkunku and Palmer would really benefit from. Again, this is why I likened it to what we saw with McKenna's tactics, where the winger inverts almost into a half space and then is given a bit more freedom to play where they want. And Palmer and Nkunku are brilliant creators, so I think they would thrive in this system. And yeah, as I said, the overlapping runs on the fullbacks. We've seen Gusto so good when he overlaps, and James is as well, overlapping, crosses into the box. And it's a pretty big method of how Stuttgart have attacked, actually, which is something that we haven't seen Chelsea do in a long time. Crosses into the box, like what does that even mean? But as I said as well, I really like his use of wide players, and I think this would bring out the best in the likes of Sterling, Mudryk and Madueke, because they are tasked with going 1-versus-1 versus the opposition fullback, beat your man, get to the byline, put a cross in. And I love that. I think that Mudryk would be best in that sort of style of football, and we've seen Madueke has been really good at it at the end of the season as well. Overall, I'm a massive fan of Hoeneß, and I think he's destined to become, I reckon he's going to be one of the best managers in the world in the next 10 years. I think he's going to be up there. I'll be surprised if he doesn't get like a Man City job when Pep leaves. That's how highly I rate him. But as I said, getting him to London is going to be a huge task, and I think almost too huge. But he still remains my first choice. Whether we get him or not, we'll have to wait and see. I'm going to keep following Stuttgart regardless because I like him, but I would really like him at Chelsea. But when we consider everything else we know, the likes of Kompany, Tuchel, Flick, Mourinho, and whoever else has been mentioned have all been ruled out through either going somewhere else or been mentioned that they didn't make the shortlist. I can't say I'm upset about that though, because out of them all, Tuchel's the only one that I'd really want. And at that point, he's not going to want to come back for obvious reasons. So it'll be interesting as well to see where Pochettino goes. For me, Manchester United seems like the obvious choice. Again, if Ten Hag leaves, I think they're going to look at either Pochettino or Tuchel. It'll be one of the two, and I'm going to hate whoever they choose out of them two. But Matt Law also did suggest that there's a chance that if Man United go for Gareth Southgate, Pochettino could become England manager. And I think that'd be really interesting, but I don't think I'm convinced it's going to happen. So I think we can almost rule that out. But as I mentioned, Hoeneß would be my first choice, but I don't think it looks likely. I think the situation that De Zerbi's going through screams, it's almost too obvious in a way, but it looks like that's the most viable option. I think McKenna needs to go to somewhere like Brighton first before he joins Chelsea. So for me, I really like McKenna, but I don't know if he'd be my choice. So I actually think it could be Maresca. He's not my favourite option, but I also think tactically he could be the smartest man. And I think he could get a lot out of this squad. But let me know down below who you think Chelsea should go for. Do you think it should be someone from this list? Or do you think they should look elsewhere? Who is your favourite for it? And also, what's your thoughts on the Brighton situation? Who's going to go to Brighton? And what's going on with Ten Hag? What do you reckon's going on with Ten Hag? But interestingly, has Ten Hag saved his job? He recently just won the FA Cup with Man United against Man City, which none of us predicted. So if you want to find out how Manchester United did that and the tactics they used to beat a very good Manchester City side, go and check out my last video. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you very soon.